Think about the number in your head, the number that represents enough, the salary, the savings, the net worth, that would finally make you feel free. Now ask yourself something honest. How many times has that number already changed? Because here is what nobody talks about. Every time you get closer to enough, enough moves, and the person chasing it never quite arrives. Today we are going to talk about why, not to take away your ambition, but to give you something more powerful than a number, a destination that actually exists. This is the bigger picture. Let me take you back to a moment you probably remember. Not a specific date, not a dramatic event, but a feeling. The feeling of wanting something, working toward it, sacrificing for it, and finally, getting it. Maybe it was a salary milestone, a promotion, a number in your savings account that you had been watching for months, a purchase you had delayed for longer than felt reasonable, and in the moment it arrived, something happened, not what you expected. There was satisfaction, yes, a real and genuine feeling of having done something, of having reached something, and then quietly, almost immediately, it started to fade, not dramatically, not in a way you could easily explain to someone else, but the feeling you had been anticipating, the feeling that was supposed to make the sacrifice worth it, was already smaller than you imagined it would be. And somewhere in the back of your mind, a new number appeared, a new target, a new milestone, a new version of enough. And the chase, without ever pausing, without ever asking whether this was the right direction, continued. If this sounds familiar, you are not weak, you are not ungrateful, you are not doing something wrong. You are experiencing one of the most documented phenomena in all of psychological research. It has a name, hedonic adaptation, and it is the invisible force behind almost every financial decision most people make, without ever knowing it is operating. Here is how it works. The human brain has a baseline, a default level of satisfaction and well-being that it returns to, regardless of what changes in external circumstances. This baseline is remarkably stable, remarkably resistant to permanent change. When something good happens, the brain registers it, processes it, feels it, and then, gradually and automatically, recalibrates. The new salary becomes the expected salary, the new house becomes just the house, the milestone becomes the memory, and the baseline, the internal experience of ordinary life, returns to where it was before. This is not a flaw in your character, it is a feature of your biology. The same mechanism that allowed your ancestors to adapt to new environments, to stop being paralyzed by grief, to recover from loss and continue living, is the same mechanism that quietly erases the satisfaction of every financial achievement, usually within weeks or months of its arrival. The research on this is remarkable. A landmark study followed lottery winners in the months and years after their windfall. People who received life-changing sums of money, people whose external circumstances transformed overnight. Within 18 months, while their reported levels of happiness were almost identical to where they had been before. The mansion became the house, the luxury car became the commute. The freedom that was supposed to feel extraordinary had become ordinary, and the baseline came home. Now sit with what this means for the way you are currently building your financial life. If the destination keeps moving, and the arrival never feels the way you imagined, then the strategy built entirely around reaching the destination is a strategy built on a foundation, e.g., that does not exist. Not because ambition is wrong, not because financial goals are meaningless, but because goals attached to a moving target, produce a very specific kind of life, a life of almost enough, almost there, almost free, always almost, and almost is an exhausting place to live. There is a question that most people never ask, not because they are afraid of the answer, but because the noise of daily life, the obligations and the urgencies and the endless stream of things that need attention right now, makes the space for that question almost impossible to find. The question is this: Who decided what enough looks like for you? Not you, not in any conscious or deliberate way. The version of enough that most people are chasing, ours, was assembled gradually from sources that had nothing to do with what actually makes a human life feel meaningful. From parents who were doing their best with what they knew and passed on definitions of success that were shaped by their own fears and limitations and unexamined assumptions. From a culture that measures everything in numbers and rewards the performance of wealth with social validation at every step. From an industry that profits enormously from keeping you focused on a version of enough that is always just slightly out of reach. From comparison. The quiet, constant, devastating practice of measuring your internal experience against other people's external presentation, the neighbor's car, the colleague's promotion, the stranger on the internet whose financial highlight reel appears in your feed at exactly the moment your own life feels most ordinary. None of these sources were trying to help you build a life that feels genuinely yours. They were simply present, loud, consistent, and over time, they shaped a definition of enough that you inherited without ever choosing it. And here is what makes it so difficult to see. The inherited definition comes with constant reinforcement. Every upgrade feels earned, every milestone feels like progress. Every comparison that goes in your favor feels like confirmation that you are on the right track. The system rewards the performance of wealth with exactly the kind of social feedback that the human brain finds most compelling: approval, recognition, the sense of moving forward. While the cost of that performance, measured in time, in stress, in the quiet erosion of things that actually matter, remains almost entirely invisible until it doesn't. There is a pattern that shows up, in the financial histories of people who built everything they were supposed to build and still arrived somewhere that felt wrong. It does not announce itself dramatically. It arrives quietly, usually somewhere in the 40s, sometimes the 50s. In a moment of unexpected stillness between one obligation and the next, when the noise of building pauses just long enough for a question to form. Is this the life I meant to build? Not is this a good life? Not is this a successful life by the standards I was given? Is this the life I meant to build? And the answer are, for more people than you would expect, is complicated, because they did everything right. They followed the map. They hit the milestones. They earned the income, accumulated the assets, achieved the external markers of a life well constructed. And yet something is missing. Not dramatically. Not in a way that is easy to name or explain or justify to someone who would look at the external picture and see only success, but present, quietly and persistently present. Like a room in a house you built yourself that you never quite enter. That room is where your actual definition of enough lives. And in the next part of this conversation, we are going to open the door. Let me try something with you. Not an exercise from a self-help book, not a worksheet with boxes to fill in. Something simpler than that, and more demanding. Think about the last time you felt genuinely wealthy, not when your account balance was highest, not when you made the purchase you had been planning, not when you reached the milestone you had been working toward. The last time you felt genuinely wealthy, present, enough. Like the life you were living was actually the life you meant to be living. Take a moment, really take it, because that memory is data. The most accurate financial data you will ever collect. It tells you what you actually value, underneath the noise of what you think you should value. And for most people, when they sit honestly with that memory, it does not involve a number. It involves time, a morning that belonged entirely to them, a conversation that went somewhere real, work that felt meaningful rather than merely compensated, the presence of people they love without the distraction of everything else pulling at their attention, a moment of genuine freedom, not the freedom that comes from having enough money, the freedom that comes from having enough time. Those two things are not the same, and confusing them is one of the most expensive mistakes in modern financial life. Research by the American Psychological Association found that people who prioritize time over money report consistently higher levels of life satisfaction, stronger relationships, better physical health outcomes, than those who prioritize money over time. This finding holds across income levels. It holds across age groups. It holds across cultures. And yet the default structure of modern professional life is built entirely around the opposite trade. More money for less time, longer hours for higher compensation, career advancement measured in salary, rather than autonomy. Most people make this trade without ever consciously choosing it. It happens gradually, one promotion at a time, one lifestyle upgrade at a time, one yes to something that costs hours, when what you needed was space. Until one day they look up, and the life they are living bears almost no resemblance to the life they imagined they were building. That moment of recognition is one of the most common experiences among high earners in their 40s and 50s, the decade when achievement and dissatisfaction arrive simultaneously, in a combination that is genuinely confusing because nobody told them this was possible. So let me ask you the question that cuts through all of it. Not what do you want to have? What do you want your days to feel like? Specifically, concretely, not in retirement, not when the mortgage is paid and the kids are through school and you finally have permission to live differently. Now, in an ordinary week. What would a wealthy ordinary week actually feel like for you? What time would you wake up? What would the morning contain? What work would you do? And how much of it? And under what conditions? Who would you spend time with? What would you say no to that you are currently saying yes to? What would you protect that you are currently sacrificing? Those answers are your actual definition of wealth, not the number, not the asset class, not the retirement calculator projection, the feeling of a Wednesday morning. That belongs to you. And here is what makes this question so powerful. When you know what you are actually building toward, every financial decision changes. The mortgage that requires both incomes to service, looks different when you know that one income and more time is closer to what you actually want. The promotion that comes with 60-hour weeks looks different when you know that what you value most is the morning that belongs to you. The lifestyle upgrade that feels earned looks different when you calculate what it costs, not in dollars, but in options, in freedom. In the gap between where you are and the Wednesday morning you are actually building toward, that gap is your real financial picture, and closing it starts with knowing it exists. Let's talk about what actually changes things, not in theory, not in the abstract language of financial philosophy that sounds meaningful in a video, and disappears by Tuesday morning when the alarm goes off, and the day begins, and the pressures are immediate, and the path of least resistance is the only path that feels possible. In practice, in the real and specific decisions that determine whether the gap between where you are and the life you actually want is closing or quietly growing wider. The first thing that actually changes things is redefining what progress looks like. Most people measure progress in accumulation, more money, more assets, more things, more status, more markers of a life moving in the right direction. And accumulation, as a measure of progress, has one fatal flaw. It has no natural endpoint. There is always more to accumulate, always a higher number, a bigger house, a better car, a more impressive title, a larger portfolio. And so progress, measured in accumulation, is a race with no finish line, a game designed to be played forever by someone who was never told it had no winner. The people who escape this trap don't do it by wanting less. They do it by measuring differently. They shift the primary metric of their financial life from how much they have accumulated to how much freedom they have built. Freedom measured not in net worth, but in options. the option to say no to things that drain them, the option to say yes to things that matter, the option to spend their time, the only resource that does not renew, in ways that align with what they actually value. That shift, from accumulation to freedom as the primary metric, changes everything about how they build. It changes which decisions feel important. It changes which sacrifices feel worth making. It changes the answer to the question, is this enough? Because enough, defined as a level of freedom rather than a level of accumulation, is actually reachable. It has a real location, a real feeling, a real moment when you arrive, and the target does not move. The second thing that actually changes things is protecting the gap deliberately. The gap between what you earn and what you need is your actual wealth. Not the number on your statement, the gap. Every dollar of that gap represents an option. The option to work less, the option to walk away, the option to take a risk that matters, the option to say yes to something that doesn't pay well, but means everything. And lifestyle inflation, the quiet, automatic, socially rewarded expansion of what you need, is the primary mechanism by which that gap disappears, not dramatically, not in a single decision, but gradually. The apartment becomes the house becomes the bigger house, the reliable car becomes the status car. Each upgrade individually reasonable, each upgrade collectively, consuming the gap, consuming the options, consuming the freedom. That was always supposed to be the point. Protecting the gap does not mean living small. It means living deliberately. Asking of every significant financial decision, not can I afford this, but what does this cost me in options, in freedom, in the gap between where I am and the life I am actually building toward. That question changes which decisions feel important and which ones feel urgent but aren't. The third thing is the relationship with time itself. Most people treat time as the thing they trade for money, the raw material of income, the resource that gets spent in order to accumulate everything else. But time, unlike money, does not renew. You cannot earn more of it. You cannot save it up and spend it later. You cannot recover what was spent in a year that felt like a transaction rather than a life. And the people who build genuine wealth, the kind that actually changes how their days feel, almost always reach a point where they stop trading time for money and start trading money for time. Not because they have so much money it no longer matters, but because they understood early enough that of the two resources, only one was truly finite, and they made their financial decisions accordingly. There is a kind of wealth that never appears on a statement. It does not show up in a net worth calculation. It cannot be photographed or posted or pointed to across a dinner table. It has no ticker symbol, no market value, no comparable sale in the neighborhood. And yet, it is the kind of wealth that changes how every single day feels from the inside. Let me describe it to you. It is the wealth of waking up on a Monday morning without dread. Not with excitement necessarily, not with the performed enthusiasm of someone who has convinced themselves that passion makes work painless. Simply without dread. The quiet confidence of knowing that the day ahead is a day you chose, not perfectly, not without obligation or difficulty or the ordinary friction of a real life, but chosen, aligned, at least in its broad shape, with what you actually value. That feeling is not available for purchase. It cannot be acquired at any income level by someone who has never asked the question underneath it, but it can be built slowly, deliberately, by someone who understood early enough that this was always what they were actually building toward and made their financial decisions accordingly. There is research from Harvard, a study that ran for over 80 years, following hundreds of people across the full arc of their lives, tracking their health, their relationships, their happiness, their regrets. It is one of the longest and most comprehensive studies of human well-being ever conducted. And its conclusion, after 80 years of data, was not what most people expect, not wealth, not achievement, not status or recognition or the accumulation of things. The single strongest predictor of a long, healthy, genuinely satisfying life was the quality of relationships, the depth of connection with other people, the presence of people who knew you, really knew you, and chose to stay. Now sit with what that means for the way most people are spending the resource that finances their lives. Their time, the promotions that consumed evenings, the deals that consumed weekends, the relentless forward motion of building that left very little space for the thing the research says matters most. This is not an argument against ambition. It is not a case for choosing poverty in the name of relationships. It is something more precise than that. It is the observation that the financial decisions most people make, in service of a future that is supposed to feel free, are often the exact decisions that consume the present, EPA, that was always the only place freedom could actually live. The future is not where your life happens. Your life is happening now, in this week, in the conversations you are having or not having, in the mornings you are present for or absent from, in the small and ordinary moments that will become. When you look back from somewhere further along the road, the texture of what your life actually was, not the highlights, the texture. And the question that genuinely wealthy people ask, more than any other, is not, how do I make more? It is, what is this actually for? What is the money for? What is the work for? What is the building for? If not for a life that feels like mine. That question is not a soft question. It is the hardest financial question you will ever answer, because it requires you to look honestly at the gap between the life you are constructing and the life you actually want to live, and to make decisions that close that gap, even when those decisions are invisible to everyone around you, even when nobody applauds them, even when the path they put you on looks less impressive from the outside than the one you left. The wealth that nobody sees is the wealth that actually lasts. Not because invisible things are inherently better, but because the things worth building, the options, the time, the relationships, the mornings that belong to you, were never the kind of things that appear on a statement. They appear in a life, quietly, consistently, over a long period of time, in the ordinary moments that nobody is photographing. That is where real wealth lives. And in the next part of this conversation, we are going to bring everything together into something you can actually use, starting now, starting with what you already have. If you are still here, I want to stop for just a moment, because something is worth acknowledging. We live in a world that moves fast, faster every year. Attention pulled in 100 directions simultaneously. Content designed to be consumed in seconds, forgotten in minutes, replaced immediately by something louder, something more urgent, something engineered to produce the feeling of information without the weight of understanding. And you chose something different. You stayed through a conversation that asked you to slow down, to think honestly, to sit with questions that most financial content never asks, because the answers are complicated, and complicated does not get clicks. That choice says something about you, something that matters more than any financial strategy we have discussed. You are someone who understands that the surface is not the whole picture, that the number is not the thing, that the life being built underneath the financial decisions is the real project. And that project deserves more than tips. It deserves clarity, real clarity, the kind that builds slowly through honest conversations that are willing to go somewhere most content won't. That is what this channel was built to provide. So if this conversation has been worth your time, if something here has shifted even slightly how you see the financial world around you, I want to invite you to stay. Subscribe to this channel, not for predictions, not for hot takes, not for the particular excitement of someone telling you what to buy next week, for the bigger picture, the kind of understanding that compounds the way good investments do, slowly at first, then faster. Until one day you realize that the financial world, which once felt confusing, intimidating, always somehow working against you, has become something you navigate with quiet confidence. That shift is available to you, and it starts with staying close to conversations like this one. Subscribe. Share this with someone in your life who is working hard, chasing a version of enough that was never truly theirs, and feeling, without quite being able to name it, that something important is missing. This conversation might be exactly what they need. And now, let's finish what we started. Because everything we have discussed, the moving target of enough, the biology of hedonic adaptation, the inherited definition that was never truly yours, the real meaning of wealth as options and time and freedom, the gap between what you are building and what you actually want, all of it points toward a single question. A question that is simple enough to ask in one sentence and deep enough to take a lifetime to answer honestly. We have been circling it this entire conversation. In every layer we peeled back, in every moment where the comfortable assumption gave way to something more honest, and now we are going to ask it directly. Not because the answer is easy, but because the question, Arastai, is the most important financial tool you will ever have, more valuable than any strategy, more powerful than any portfolio, more enduring than any number, on any statement, in any institution, anywhere in the world. The question that changes everything, not just about your money, about your life. Is the life I am building actually the life I want? Sit with that. Really sit with it. Because what comes next is where everything lands. I want to end with something true, not inspiring, not motivational, not the kind of conclusion that produces a feeling in the moment and evaporates by morning. Something true. The word enough, is the most radical financial concept in the modern world. Not because it means stopping, not because it means settling, not because it means turning your back on ambition or growth or the genuine desire to build something meaningful with your time and energy, but because it means defining, deciding AC for yourself, what the destination actually is, and then building toward that destination instead of the one that was assigned. Most people never do this, not because they are lazy or unaware or incapable of the reflection it requires, but because the system they are living inside was not designed to encourage it. The economy functions best when people are always almost there, always upgrading, always comparing, always measuring themselves against a standard that moves forward at exactly the pace of their progress, to ensure they never feel the thing they are working toward. Enough. That feeling is the most dangerous thing a consumer can experience, because a person who feels enough stops performing, stops upgrading, stops measuring themselves against the neighbor, the colleague, the stranger on the internet with the highlight reel. A person who feels enough starts making decisions based on what they actually value, and that is not profitable for a system built on perpetual dissatisfaction. So the system discourages it, not through conspiracy, not through deliberate malice, simply through the relentless presence of more options, more upgrades, more versions of the life you could be living if you just worked a little harder, earned a little more, reached the next level that is always just ahead. And most people, without ever making a conscious choice, spend their entire lives inside that system, running toward a finish line that moves, chasing a feeling that the race was designed to prevent them from ever reaching. Here is what changes that. Not a strategy, not a portfolio, not a financial plan, however well constructed. A decision, quiet, personal, made somewhere between the last sentence of a conversation like this one and the first moment of the ordinary day that follows it. The decision to define enough for yourself. To sit down, honestly, without the noise of comparison or cultural expectation or inherited assumption, and answer the question that most people never ask. What would actually feel like enough for the specific life I actually want to live? Not the life on the billboard, not the life in the feed, Not the life that impresses people whose approval you stopped needing long before you stopped seeking it. Your life, the one built around what you genuinely value, the one where the Wednesday morning belongs to you, the one where the gap between what you earn and what you need is wide enough to contain real freedom, the one where the relationships are deep enough, and the time is protected enough, and the work is meaningful enough, that the word enough finally feels true, that life is not waiting for you at some future threshold. It is available now, partially, imperfectly. In the decisions you make this week, about how you spend your time, what you say yes to, what you protect, what you finally, gently let go of. Wealth is not a destination you reach, it is a practice you sustain, a set of choices made repeatedly over a long period of time that slowly and quietly build a life with more options, more presence, more of what actually matters, and less of what never did. That practice starts not with a financial plan, it starts with a question. Is the life I am building actually the life I want? Sit with that. Really sit with it. Because the answer, honestly arrived at, is the most valuable financial insight you will ever have. If this conversation has been worth your time, share it with 5 people who are chasing something without quite knowing what. They deserve this conversation, and leave a comment below, not to tell me what you thought of the video. Tell me what you want to understand next. What part of your financial life still feels like a locked room? What question you have been carrying without knowing where to take it? Ask it here, because the next conversation starts with what you need most. This is the bigger picture: money, wealth, and the life you're building. We'll see you in the next one.